breaking across the 9 worlds tonight. Unauthorized heat has crossed into the northern ice. Was creation an accident or an attack? Asgard officials insist Ymir's dismemberment produced unprecedented prosperity. Jotunheim representatives call it the largest uncompensated property conversion in cosmic history. Meanwhile, anonymous runes claim Hugin and Munin are government surveillance drones. The Norns have already selected the winners of the next election, and Outhumla controls the salt ice milk cartel. None of these claims has been verified. That has not prevented them from being shared 12 million times.
Welcome to OneStory Companion Episode 003b, Bridging the Ginnunga Gap. This is a fictional satire using Norse mythic characters to explore modern family division, political polarization, conspiracy thinking, and outrage-driven media. The dialogue is one-story dramatization, not translated mythology. Marcelle/Shakti is facilitating an imaginative family mediation, not providing clinical therapy. No political faction will escape entirely unharmed. We hope every listener will recognize at least one relative and eventually themselves.
Welcome, everyone. I am here as mediator, not judge, physician, or oracle. Our purpose is not to determine which branch of this family is morally pure. The genealogy has already made that impossible. We are here to understand what lives beneath the argument, what belongs to the past, what threatens the present, and what each of you is still trying to protect. 3 agreements. Speak from your own experience. Separate what you know from what you suspect. And do not call another participant a monster while borrowing their chair, labor, ancestry, or magical objects. Loki, that last one was added after your intake form.
For the record, I object to any process whose rules were written before I entered the room. Also, I did not borrow this chair. I liberated it from an unjust seating hierarchy. And I only called Thor a blunt instrument because subtle instrument would have been misinformation. I brought the hammer because the invitation said we would be breaking patterns. Apparently, that was a metaphor. This is why ordinary people no longer trust professional mediators.
Thor, please place the hammer where everyone can see it, and no one feels required to agree with it. Loki, humor is welcome, humiliation is not. Odin, you may observe, but you may not disguise yourself as an undecided participant. Bestla, thank you for attending as both mother of Odin and member of the family his institutions often describe as the problem. Let us begin with 1 sentence each. What are you afraid will happen if the other side gets what it wants?
I am afraid they will dismantle the order that protects the worlds without understanding what it costs to maintain. Everyone criticizes the walls. Few volunteer for the watch. Everyone condemns hard decisions after surviving the danger those decisions prevented. If authority hesitates whenever someone objects, Midgard becomes a negotiation held during an invasion.
I am afraid the walls will keep expanding until protection means that only one branch of the family is allowed to belong. I hear the gods describe Jotnar as threats while wearing the blood, knowledge and marriages of Jotnar inside their own halls. I do not ask you to leave Midgard undefended. I ask you to stop using danger as a word large enough to contain everyone you do not understand, especially when they are already seated at your family table.
I am afraid clever people will talk until the roof falls in. Some threats are real. Some rules exist because someone was injured before the rule was written. When a serpent is circling the world, I do not need a seminar on the serpent's unmet emotional needs. I need a hammer
and a clear line of sight.
I'm afraid everyone will become reasonable, and I will lose my audience. Fine. A more respectable answer. I'm afraid authority will call every contradiction dangerous, and the comfortable will call every disruption irresponsible. I know what conditional belonging feels like. Jotun-born, welcomed among the Aesir when my gifts were useful, then watched as my children were treated first as prophecies, then as threats, and finally as prisoners. That history does not excuse the harm I have done, but neither does my harm make every fear about my family just. When no one is permitted to disturb the story becomes a cage. Also, I remain concerned about the ravens.
Listen beneath the slogans. Odin is protecting stability and continuity. Bestla is protecting dignity and belonging. Thor is protecting safety and practical responsibility. Loki is protecting dissent and the right to expose hypocrisy, while also admitting that attention rewards escalation. These values are not enemies. The conflict begins when one value claims the right to erase all the others. Stability without dignity becomes domination. Belonging without safety becomes denial. Protection without dissent becomes control. Dissent without responsibility becomes fire sold as illumination.
Modern political families often divide in similar patterns. One side emphasizes order, continuity, responsibility, borders and risks created by rapid change. Another emphasizes inclusion, historical injury, unequal power, and risks created by preserving unjust arrangements. Both can identify real dangers. Both become distorted when they assume their preferred value is the only moral value, and interpret every concern from the other side as evidence of bad character. The same fracture appears when families divide over politics, religion, culture, gender identity, or sexuality. These experiences are not identical, but they often share one painful demand. Choose between belonging to your family, belonging to your community, and speaking truthfully about who you are. I do not approach that fracture only as an analyst. In later traditions, my own parentage crossed the boundary between the human and the otherworldly. For years, fear of my father was used to judge the son standing before them. I learned early that people may call ancestry evidence, difference corruption, and persecution protection. The goal is not to stand halfway between truth and falsehood, or to debate another person's humanity. It is to build decisions capable of seeing more than one kind of harm, while refusing dehumanization as a method.
On Asgard today, radical Jotun activists demand control of the sky after gods generously convert unused primordial remains into public infrastructure. On Jotunheim Voice, unelected divine elites occupy ancestral body, militarize eyebrow border, and lecture survivors about gratitude. The same world, the same wound. Two headlines engineered so that each audience can feel informed without encountering the other's fear.
Neither headline is wholly fabricated. That is why framing is powerful. One selects order, infrastructure, and survival. The other selects power, ancestry, and exclusion. Each removes facts that complicate its preferred moral picture. Exploitative news does not always need to invent evidence. It can arrange accurate fragments into a misleading emotional certainty. Before sharing a headline, ask, what fact is present? What context is absent? What emotion is being activated? And who benefits if I remain angry enough not to investigate?
When memory becomes content, every ancestor is recruited into a modern faction. One side remembers only the danger, another remembers only the injury. The archive becomes a quarry from which each group removes stones to throw at the other. Deep memory asks more of us. Remember the threat and the excess committed in answering it. Remember the achievement and the people excluded from its benefits. Remember that your opponent's history may contain evidence your own identity taught you not to notice.
We will try an exercise. Replace the headline with the human fear beneath it. Jotnar are invading may become, I am afraid rapid change will make my home unsafe and unrecognizable. The gods are oppressors may become, I am afraid people with power will never recognize the cost imposed on my family. The translated statement may still be mistaken, but it can be examined without first humiliating the speaker. When we hear the need, we gain options beyond surrender or attack.
Very well. Instead of saying, Loki wants chaos, I could say, I am afraid Loki will expose a genuine problem, turn it into entertainment, and leave everyone else to rebuild the hall. That is more accurate. It is also annoyingly therapeutic. And instead of saying, Thor is an authoritarian with a weather problem, I could say, I'm afraid Thor's urgency will close the conversation before hidden costs are considered. I could also admit that sometimes the roof is actually falling. I dislike this exercise.
Neither of you surrendered your position. Thor still values decisive protection. Loki still values disruptive questioning. But you converted identity attacks into concerns that can be tested. This is the beginning of mediation. Not agreement, but language precise enough to make cooperation possible.
In other news, a viral tablet claims Ymir was not killed, but relocated to a private realm operated by the Norns. Another alleges the sun and moon are artificial lights installed to conceal excessive muspel emissions. A third says Authumla's 4 milk streams contain memory-altering runes. The author identifies himself only as definitely not Loki.
That account is parody. The other account, possibly Loki, is independent citizen journalism. And before Mia becomes tiresome, I did include a source. It said, many are saying.
Conspiracy thinking often begins with a legitimate observation. Powerful institutions sometimes deceive. Records are incomplete. Conflicts of interest exist. Official explanations can be wrong. The reasoning fails when suspicion becomes self-sealing. Missing evidence is treated as proof of concealment. Contradictory evidence proves the conspiracy is larger. Anonymous repetition becomes corroboration. Anyone requesting verification is classified as compromised. A claim that cannot possibly be disproved is not stronger than ordinary evidence. It has escaped the conditions that make knowledge accountable.
Bring a disturbing claim to 5 gates. First, what exactly is being alleged? Second, what is the original source, not the account repeating it? Third, what evidence would we expect if the claim were true? Fourth, what evidence would cause us to revise or reject it? Fifth, has an independent source with access to the facts confirmed it? If the claim refuses every gate, do not invite it into the hall merely because it arrived carrying your preferred enemy.
A conspiracy can feel less frightening than uncertainty. It gives suffering an author. It turns chaos into intention. It transforms isolation into membership among those who believe they can see behind the curtain. Ridicule may strengthen that belonging. Offer something better. Respectful inquiry, honest uncertainty, evidence that can be checked, and a community in which changing one's mind does not require public humiliation. People release false certainty more readily when truth does not demand social exile.
Before we continue, notice what outrage does inside the body. The jaw tightens, breath shortens, attention narrows. The nervous system prepares for danger before the mind has established whether danger is present. Place both feet on the ground. Let the breath lengthen. This is not avoidance. It is preparation for clearer action. A regulated body can still say no. It can still set a boundary. It is simply less available for manipulation by whoever profits from panic.
Common ground is often misunderstood as splitting every difference. If one person says the bridge can carry 10 wagons and another says it can carry none, truth is not automatically 5 wagons. Common ground is the shared commitment to test the bridge honestly, protect people during the test, publish the result, and revise the policy together. The agreement is not about the answer. It is about a trustworthy way of finding and acting upon the answer.
Before this council ends, remember the genealogy. Odin is the son of Bestla, a Jotun. Thor is the son of Jörð, the personified earth, whose ancestry reaches into the giant kind. The gods learn from Jotnir, marry them, desire them, bargain with them, and define themselves against them. The family boundary is politically useful and mythologically porous. Purity is usually a recent story told about an ancient mixture. I do not need Odin to declare that every decision of the gods was evil. I need him to say that the world was not made by the gods alone, that giant kind is more than a category of threat, and that belonging cannot depend upon forgetting his own mother, or asking a relative to disappear so the family story remains comfortable. Acknowledgement does not give me control of Asgard. It gives us a truthful place from which to negotiate.
Then I can say this. The order we built depends upon powers, knowledge, bodies, and relationships that did not originate with the Aesir alone. Some threats were real. Some responses exceeded what protection required. Some stories made authority easier by making our relatives less complicated than they were. I may not understand every life or expression represented at my table. Understanding cannot be demanded in a single evening. But dignity can. Remembering that does not require abandoning every boundary. It requires guarding them with greater wisdom.
I propose a pilot project. One disputed crossing. Mixed oversight from Asgard and Jotunheim. Heimdall evaluates security. Mia publishes the evidence. Mimir records what was tried. Marcelle handles complaints. Loki is forbidden from naming the project. We review the results after one season. If it fails, we change it. If it works, we expand it. No one has to surrender the entire world before learning something. Too late, I have registered Bridgie McBridgeface. The premium alternative is the Ginnunga Gap Truth and Reconciliation Rainbow, sponsored by Authumla Dairy. Fine, call it the Common Crossing. But I want the minutes to reflect that my name's tested better with younger listeners.
Thor's proposal meets the conditions for responsible cooperation. The scope is limited. Risks are visible. Oversight is shared. Outcomes can be measured. Failure does not destroy either community. Success creates evidence for the next decision. Trust need not begin as faith in the other side's character. It can begin as confidence in a transparent process.
Leave each participant a dignified path to change. If every correction requires someone to confess that they were stupid, evil, or deceived, they will defend error to preserve belonging. We can say, the evidence changed. The risk was different than we expected. We learned something together. Humility becomes possible when revision is treated as maturity rather than defeat.
Leave each participant a dignified path to change. If every correction requires someone to confess that they were stupid, evil, or deceived, they would defend error to preserve belonging. We can say, the evidence changed. The risk was different than we expected. We learned something together. Humility becomes possible when revision is treated as maturity rather than defeat.
Here is the practice this family will carry forward. Name the claim without insulting the claimant. Do not turn a person's identity, faith, doubt, or humanity into the object of debate. Separate verified fact, interpretation, and suspicion. Name the fear and the legitimate value beneath the position. Recognize injury without assigning inherited personal guilt. Choose one shared problem. Design one limited, reversible experiment. Measure whether it improves life, not whether it humiliates the opposing faction. Return to the council with results. This is how conflict becomes energy for transformation rather than fuel for another ending.
The first life emerged where fire and ice met across the gap. Our political and family divisions will not close because one side finally destroys the other's identity. They may become generative when difference is held within truthful boundaries, shared inquiry, mutual dignity, and practical cooperation. The bridge is not agreement about every story. Understanding is not agreement. Belonging is not silence. A boundary protects a person. It must not become a weapon for punishing identity. The family may leave some beliefs unsettled, but no one at the table should be dehumanized, threatened, or required to disappear in order to belong.
Breaking news. Opposing factions complete first constructive meeting. No hall burned. Hammer remained visible but unused. Several participants revised language without dissolving into mist. Experts warn this development may reduce engagement. We will continue monitoring the situation with concern.
A family does not bridge its deepest gap by forgetting the fire or pretending the ice was never cold. It builds where both can be approached without demanding that either cease to exist. Some bridges begin in timber and stone. Others begin when an accusation becomes a question, a slogan becomes a human fear, and an enemy becomes complicated enough to resemble a relative. Across the Ginnunga Gap, the first world awakened. Across the gaps between us, another may still begin.
This mediation offered a practical framework, not a claim that every conflict can be resolved through conversation alone. Some situations require firm boundaries, protection, accountability, or legal action. Dialogue should never be used to pressure people into remaining unsafe. But where people share a world, retain some capacity for good faith, and can participate without coercion, disciplined mediation can transform disagreement into learning. The Gnunga gap is not crossed by pretending differences are small. It is crossed by building something strong enough to hold difference without sacrificing anyone's dignity.